So Paul's letter to the Corinthians here dovetails nicely with last weekend's readings and the homily that I was preaching. But it occurs to me last week when I was preaching, and it struck me today when we were reading St. Paul here, just how susceptible I personally am to these kinds of rivalries and preferences and things that tear down the body rather than building it up, things that divide rather than bring things together. We don't necessarily have Paul and Apollos, but in the recent memory and present day of the church, we have Benedict XVI and Francis, right? Two very different men, two very different sort of camps of, it is the campiness is the problem, but we could also say two different emphases, right? And this is where like last weekend's homily kind of needs to come to the fore when we talk about these rivalries, and to look at things sometimes as emphases rather than rivalry, right? That one person can lead a group of people in a general trajectory with a different emphasis. So, like if you imagine a sailing ship, if you know how sailing works, you have to tack. You can't always drive a straight line, a straight course to where you want to go. Sometimes the wind just doesn't allow you, and so you have to tack left and right, and you zigzag your way to where you want to go, according to what the wind allows for. And sometimes in our politic, in our communal life together as a Christian people, sometimes the body is taking a tack along a different trajectory, and then back and forth and back and forth. Now, this doesn't. Paul's admonition here is not allowing for error. He's not saying you shouldn't concern yourself with whether or not you're in a group of folks who are going in the wrong direction. In fact, he's railing against that, right? He's like, you Corinthians, you're still living as in the flesh. You're still doing the wrong thing. But in this case, that fleshiness, that worldly thinking, is what he's recognizing is that the worldly thinking of this Christian community is devolving from the unity in Christ to trying to impose sort of a worldly political partisanship on the church, right? And this is what he's saying is a big problem, right? There shouldn't be camps of Apollos and Paul and Peter and whomever else. Now, I've never experienced that in my life, so I don't know what that looks like in terms of being totally united in Christ. And I don't think we ever will, because as long as I've been alive and as long as I've paid attention to anything, there's always been sort of these cliques and camps of people who prefer one thing to another. What I think we have to be careful of and start to tear down is to see the other camp, the other emphasis, as somehow threatening to or contrary to my preference, right? If I happen to like, I don't like this, by the way, so I'm going to use it as an example, right? If I happen to like all Latin Mass, again, reiterating, I don't like that. I don't speak Latin. I don't even speak Spanish, right? I'm very glad that we have, by and large, that we have English liturgy, right? I think Latin needs to remain a bedrock in that liturgy, but I'm very glad that we have an English liturgy. So that being said, let's say I really prefer to have Latin in the liturgy, and that Latin comes with oftentimes disposition of the priest with the people facing God rather than the priest facing with his back to God facing the people. And those things oftentimes go together. So then there's Mass with Latin would normally have the priest facing with the people as sort of a member of the people, member of the same body facing God that they're talking to. That's the way that would normally work. And now I'm talking to a guy here who's saying, man, I really hate it when the priest has his back to the people, and I love it when the priest faces the people. Here's my inclination, right? My inclination is to say, that guy hates Latin in the Mass, and I really like Latin in the Mass. We must therefore be enemies. But that's not what he's saying at all. He's not saying anything about Latin, is he? He's saying something about a totally separate thing, right? And so this sort of trickles down. We sort of infer people's meaning on people's preferences over and above or against our own preferences, and then we become antagonistic towards them, right? So I don't know that we're ever going to get away from preferring people who have our own preferences, who share our own preferences. But what we can start to get away from is seeing those who have different preferences in groups of people who share their preference as enemies, as people who are antagonistic towards what I like, right? And start to find the ways that how what I like can strengthen what they like, and how what they like can strengthen what I like. Right? Because, as Paul's saying, we're one body doing different things. The one who waters and the one who plants are doing two different things. But the one who waters doesn't hold the one who plants in contempt. The one who plants doesn't hold the one who waters in contempt. They're both doing two good things that need to be done for the whole to grow. Right? And they can't both do both jobs. And we have to recognize that in the life of the church, there are some who are going to be excellent teachers and really bad administrators. There are going to be some who are excellent rubricists. They understand the liturgy and the life of the liturgy of the church. And there are going to be those who just love getting their hands dirty with the poor and feeding the homeless. And not everybody can do all those things. But what everyone can do is appreciate that all those things are getting done. Right? And that's where we have to start to live as a people. And here I'm not necessarily talking about social secular politics, although that should be true in our secular politics as well. But I'm mostly thinking about the church here. And I'm giving this particular homily to really preach to myself about this, because I'm so susceptible to this campiness and this sort of clickiness, and I need to say it out loud for myself, to say, hey, cut it out, right? It's not helpful. It's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to anybody else. But I think, anyways, it's something that we all struggle with to one degree or another, and so it's good for all of us to hear. So the takeaway here is, let's become more appreciative of the jobs that other people do that we can't or don't want to. Be grateful for the job that the Lord has given us to do it as well as we can, and to be grateful that all those jobs are getting done so that the whole church can be one body moving as Christ towards the heart of the Father.